How would you sum up Ian Rush as the player?
Fantastic.
In one word.
Simple as that. Fantastic.
Ian Rush is a Liverpool legend and the club's all-time leading goalscorer. But this incredible legacy is now overshadowed by one of the strangest episodes in sports history. When former teammate Robbie Fowler heard about it, his reaction summed it up best. He was nuts. Fowler wasn't alone in his disbelief. Rush had publicly attacked a list of high-profile figures in a 90-minute score-settling rant that nobody could have predicted. Today, we're looking at 6 football legends who absolutely hated Ian Rush after this bizarre incident. It all started with something truly unbelievable. Ian Rush put his name to a 90-minute AI-generated musical. The production was created in the style of the Broadway hit Hamilton, using hip-hop and sung-through vocals, but the execution was deeply flawed. The AI-generated vocals were synthetic and sang in an American accent. Even worse, the AI couldn't pronounce his name correctly, calling him Ian Rush throughout the entire show. The recurring error encapsulated the project's amateurish execution. The entire production was sung in a distinctly American accent, despite its quintessentially British cast of characters and settings. The jarring and surreal experience was underscored by the use of AI-generated vocals that lent the entire affair a synthetic, uncanny quality. The musical wasn't about his legendary career at Liverpool. Instead, it was a confusing rant about a 4-year legal battle with a scaffolding company and a small law firm. The plot was dense and almost impossible to follow. After about 30 minutes, viewers found it difficult to keep track of what was happening or stay focused. The narrative structure was chaotic. It began as a broad rant about the media before descending into a dense and convoluted legal diatribe. The central thesis was that old Rushy had been repeatedly denied justice by a corrupt system, but this claim was lost amidst the confusing narrative and bizarre artistic choices. The choice of medium was revealing. To frame a minor commercial legal dispute within the heroic, nation-building narrative structure of Hamilton was a profound, strategic miscalculation. It inflated the perceived importance of the grievance to a comical degree. The absurdity of an AI-generated Ian Rush singing about scaffolding companies and legal manoeuvring ensured that the underlying claims would never be taken seriously. The medium itself became the story, completely overshadowing the intended message. This musical is one of the strangest things a football legend has ever done. What's the most bizarre thing you've seen a player do after retiring? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into football's wildest stories. To understand why Rush created this musical, we need to look at the backstory. The production was the result of Rush's partnership with a controversial Singaporean property firm named Irama. The company is owned by Parvinder Perry Chopra, a US-based British entrepreneur who keeps an almost non-existent public profile. Despite owning at least 30 companies, 2 yachts, and a small airport, Chopra has no in-depth interviews or even photographs readily available online. This secrecy extends to how the company operates. Journalists who tried to ask basic questions about Irama's business plans were met with aggressive and evasive responses. The company even sent bizarre, semi-comprehensible threats of legal action to reporters who questioned their practices. This documented history of using legal intimidation makes their later portrayal as victims of the legal system deeply ironic. The company operates like a shadow. No one really knows what their long-term plans are or what motivates their business decisions. This opacity made Rush's association with them even more troubling. Rush was the public face of the company. He was described as a partner who held 20% ownership of real estate purchased by the firm, though he wasn't a shareholder in the parent company itself. News reports, particularly surrounding a proposed takeover of the Northern Irish club Crusaders FC, described him as a key shareholder. However, official records from the Singapore Business Registry show that Chopra is the sole shareholder of Irama. His legendary status was used to give the secretive business credibility and legitimacy. But when the controversy erupted, Irama issued disclaimers stating that Rush plays no part in any other part of Irama's business and should not be held responsible for its acts. Yet his deep involvement was undeniable. He had become the shield for activities that were opposite to the community-focused values his sporting legacy was built on. But the real controversy came from Irama's business model. The company focused on buying the ground towns of small, financially weak non-league football clubs. These clubs are the heart of local communities, built on tradition and volunteer work. They represent something more than just football. They are gathering places for families and symbols of local pride. For many small towns, these clubs are part of their identity. In 2021, 2 clubs were forced to fold because of Irama's actions. Whiteleaf FC of the Isthmian League stated that Irama refused to negotiate a new lease and terminated their tenancy. The club was forced to pay Irama nearly £50,000 in back rent, which they disputed was ever due. Abingdon Town of the Hellenic League blamed the ridiculous demands of the new landlords for making it impossible to continue. Both clubs cited disputes with their new landlord as the reason they had to withdraw from their respective divisions. The Football Supporters Association called these events a devastating blow to the non-league community and a worrying development for the security of football assets. These weren't faceless corporations that folded. They were clubs with histories spanning decades. They had supporters who had attended matches for generations, volunteers who had dedicated countless hours to keeping them alive. All of that was destroyed because of financial disputes with new landlords who seemed to have no understanding or care for what these clubs meant to their communities. Rush responded with a tweet claiming he had nothing to do with the dealings and promised a police investigation that would lead to consequences. However, no investigation ever materialized, and the promise was never fulfilled. The statement hung as a bizarre and unfulfilled threat. It was clear he was trying to distance himself from the fallout, but his name and face were already too closely tied to Irama for that to work. The musical was Irama and Rush's attempt to reframe themselves as the victims of this legal fallout. It was a 90-minute laundry list of personal grudges against people they blamed for their problems. The opening act alone targeted a wide array of individuals and organisations, laying the groundwork for the score settling that defined the production. The second and third acts escalated the attacks, going studs up on some law firms, criticising some senior lawyers and judges by name, as well as the legal system generally. The first 2 targets were Robbie Fowler and Jamie Carragher. The musical personally attacked these 2 Liverpool legends. It complained that they never called old Rushy back and ignored him when the controversy started. The song lamented that there was no mate-to-mate hello between them. The sense of betrayal was expressed in a verse that captured Rush's hurt feelings. The context makes this even more important. Fowler and Carragher had previously withdrawn video endorsements from Irama's Facebook page. They stated the clips were not intended for commercial use. The musical treated this as a deep personal betrayal, even though it was a reasonable business decision. These were people Rush had played alongside for years at Liverpool. Now he was attacking them in a public musical for simply protecting their own reputations. The third target was Tracy Crouch. The musical included the former UK sports minister in its opening rant. This wasn't a random choice. Crouch had chaired the independent fan-led review of football governance. Her work addressed issues like the ownership of football assets, which was exactly what Irama was doing. Her recommendations were a direct threat to their business model. The fourth target was Martin Calladine. The musical accused this journalist of casting aside the wider truth in his reporting. Calladine had written multiple investigative articles detailing Irama's secretive and controversial business practices. He was attacked simply for exposing what the company was really doing. The fifth target was Ollie Chamberlain. The musical accused him of writing a critical article that gave a viral start to the negative press. But this was a massive blunder. It was a clear case of mistaken identity. Ollie Chamberlain is a non-league footballer. The creators had confused him with the photographer, who was simply credited for an image on an article about Irama. This single error destroyed the credibility of all their other claims. If they couldn't even correctly identify the people they were attacking, how could anyone trust their complex allegations about the British legal system? It was a fatal display of shoddy research that undermined the credibility of every other claim made in the production. The sixth figure wasn't directly in the musical, but the relationship is important. Take Graham Souness, Rush's former manager. In 2020, Rush publicly defended Souness's ideas, but also criticised his methods. Rush stated that Souness changed things too quickly, and in doing so lost both the old ones and the young ones in the squad. Rush even claimed that Souness would be up there with the likes of Jurgen Klopp if he were managing today. His key defence was that Souness had the right ideas, but changed things too quickly. This defence of a figure accused of disruptively dismantling an established order offers a striking psychological parallel to the Irama affair. This willingness to settle old scores in public shows a pattern of behaviour that led to the musical. Rush's defence of him suggests he sees himself in a similar light, someone with the right ideas who was rejected by people who didn't understand his vision. The musical was a complete strategic catastrophe. The public and media reaction was one of universal bewilderment and ridicule. Online forums were flooded with comments from users struggling to process the news. One person described the headline as a previously unsaid sentence in human history. Others begged fellow readers to listen to the clips, calling the production hilarious, desperate stuff. The event was immediately cemented in the annals of bizarre football folklore. The premiere perfectly showed how delusional the project was. It was held in Cannes during the film festival, but not at the festival itself. Instead, it took place at a rental property owned by Irama. This was an attempt to borrow prestige without earning it. It mirrors the entire Irama enterprise, using Rush's name to legitimize controversial business practices and appropriating Hamilton's style to legitimize petty grievances. In every aspect, the project relied on superficial association rather than actual quality. Things got worse. Reports emerged that Irama was begging for students on film message boards to produce a movie for them. The students would have to use their own equipment and would receive no payment, only a trip to Cannes. This detail further exposed the chaotic, poorly funded, and deeply unserious nature of the entire venture. But the most incompetent act of all was uploading the musical to Vimeo under a public domain dedication. This legal decision had an immediate and irreversible consequence. It surrendered all copyright to the work. Anyone was now legally free to use, adapt, and remix the musical without limitation, even if the original was taken down. Their weapon for settling scores had become a self-inflicted wound, ensuring that this bizarre monument to their poor judgment would live on in perpetuity, beyond their power to erase it. So why did Rush do this? He likely sees himself as a victim, a misunderstood pioneer. His defense of Souness is a psychological parallel. He defended a disruptor who changed things too quickly. Rush and Chopra likely don't see themselves as aggressors who destroyed community clubs. Instead, they see themselves as innovators being unfairly attacked by a corrupt system. This mindset explains the grandiose nature of the musical. They genuinely believed they were revolutionary figures fighting a tyrannical establishment. The public, however, saw something very different. They saw a wealthy former footballer and an opaque property developer complaining about legal fees and business deals gone sour. The disconnect between how Rush saw himself and how the world saw him was total and complete. On the pitch, Ian Rush's legacy is secure. He is a true Liverpool icon and one of the greatest strikers of his generation. But this entire episode is a shocking cautionary tale. It shows how a lifetime of sporting achievement can be permanently tarnished by questionable business partners and a single, profoundly ill-judged public relations stunt. The baffling and unintentionally hilarious production will now forever be attached to his name. What do you think?